and Orioles go out and play 4 on the south side of town where my last name's on the wall and a little statue of the cousin out in center field, and basically nobody at the games because they suck too. In a battle of who can finish in 5th place, or last place as we call it around here, we go out to the Windy City to continue a conversation about all things Orioles and White Sox, as well as Manny Machado to the Cubs. This guy's been covering sports in the Chicago scene for a long, long time. It's the Chicago Tribune as a sports columnist. Blackhawks and Bulls and White Sox and Cubs and Bears and all that good stuff. David Haugh joins us from the Chicago Tribune. You can follow him out on Twitter. It is spelled Haugh. He is a defending champion around here. And, I don't know what the bigger story is. How bad the White Sox stink, or, hey, Manny, how'd you like to be a Cub later in the summer, right? That's going to be the big story all week long as the Orioles visit, right?
That's an easy one. Everyone knows the White Sox stink, and everybody accepts that the White Sox will stink. It's sort of by design, and I think Manny is a bigger story, and it's a lot of anticipation. I wouldn't have been surprised if somebody greeted him at the airport with signs if they were able to catch a glimpse of Manny Machado. But it makes sense for the Cubs to be interested, to be engaged, and to try to do everything possible to get a guy who, even though he would be a rental, would be a guy that fits in this culture and helps put them over the top. Do they need him? Well, no. Do they want him? We think so. Would he make an impact? Absolutely.
Well, you say in this culture. It's very, very hard in Baltimore to, unless you've been to Wrigley lately or watching it on TV. I was out there, incidentally. I didn't go to any of the playoff games or any of the World Series games that year, but I was out there for a whole weekend when Pearl Jam was playing at Wrigley, and that was, a good 5-6 weeks. I mean, they had a 20-game lead at the time. It was very clear they were going to play October baseball, and as I had said all summer, what happened in Game 1 was all that mattered there. You better win Game 1 when you got that kind of a lead. And I saw the lead up to it, but now, they've kind of fallen back to the pack. The parade was a long time ago. Jake Arrieta was a long time ago. And it feels like they need some spice, and it certainly doesn't feel like any of these other teams in the Central are going away, and they don't feel capable of winning 100 games anymore.
The culture is created by the expectations that are new around here in terms of, and relatively new. I guess it seems a long time since 16, but, when you wait 108 years for a World Series, a couple years isn't that long, relatively speaking. What has been created on the north side is an atmosphere of urgency, and I think that makes every 5-game losing streak seem like Armageddon, and it makes every bad inning or bad start by Yu Darvish seem like a $126 million waste of money. He came back yesterday with a strong start. He came back with looking like the guy that he needs to be. But the pressure exists each and every game, 162 times. That's what I mean. What I mean when I say Manny Machado would fit here. There's a part of the fan base that wants the Cubs to go for it every year. Theo Epstein tapped the brakes a little bit in an interview on the radio here on the Score a couple weeks ago by saying and reminding people that you can't continue to raid your farm system for players who could be rentals. And I think to a large number of Cubs fans, it fell on deaf ears. I think they understand and respect that, but they want to win again. And I think that Machado is one of those talents, given the start that he's off to in Baltimore, that says, when you have an opportunity to get a top 5 player in the majors, you do everything you can to make that happen.
It's amazing around here. It's been so long and so forgotten, and I know maybe once in a while you catch an Oriole highlight somewhere. It looks like the Montreal Expos, Dave. It's literally that bad where most nights 3, 4, 5, 6,000 people at the ballpark, at least in the early going, and they're giving tickets for free to kids here. This is a bizarre time where Peter's no longer really running it, but we have no idea who's running it. Everything about the team is lame duck, from Showalter and Duquette to Machado and Adam Jones and Brad Brock and Zach Britton. And it really feels like they're about to go into a dark period. We don't even know who's negotiating this deal and who is going through the litany of high A prospects in the Cubs organization to say, we want this guy or that guy. Meanwhile, in Chicago, you got a team on the south side playing completely meaningless baseball games that no one cares about or is watching, and everyone's engaged in every part of the Cubs all of a sudden. And when there is that expectation, and people are paying attention and coming to the ballpark and paying top dollar, there's no excuse for not trying to win this year and doing everything. And meanwhile, on the south side of town, they're tanking. I mean, it's a bizarre environment to be covering baseball there, I would think, where the expectations are so different from team to team and north side to south side.
Expectations certainly different. That's a good observation, but I think what's consistent with both sides of town is that they're, for the first time in I think a long time, it's simultaneous hope, and there's encouragement that can be found looking at both organizations. You just have to look deeper into the Sox organization to find it, and I think the Cubs, as I just described, it's a daily exercise in urgency, and I think they want to win it, and they want to win it now. The White Sox, much different. They reset the clock. When they traded Chris Sale after the 2016 season. They have replenished their farm system. It's as good as there is in baseball right now. Unlike the Orioles, they have a sense of direction. They know where they're headed. They have the evidence in the minor leagues, and Eloy Jimenez, the guy, he's a power hitter at AA, and Michael Kopech, who's going to be a star. He's at AAA right now, but they have evidence of guys on the way. That keeps them engaged. That keeps fans interested. You can look at a start by Ronaldo Lopez on Sunday by the White Sox, and 2 hits in 8 innings, and say that's going to be part of the solution. There are, this problem is not going to be here forever. I don't know what the Orioles are doing. From afar, it looks like they're one of the worst-run organizations in baseball. That's an opportunity for the Cubs because there is sort of this system-wide free fall. You hope, if you're Theo Epstein, that you can take advantage of that and seize on the desperation, because every day that passes and Manny Machado remains in an Oriole uniform, the price of renting him goes down and not up. And that's a problem for the Orioles. They should have traded him in the offseason. They should have taken advantage of all that they could get for one of the best players in the game, and yet he remains here on the south side in an Oriole uniform, with a lot of teams like the Cubs looking at him and thinking, wouldn't he look good in our uniform?
He is David Haugh. He covers all things Chicago sports at the Chicago Tribune. You can follow him at chicagotribune.com, as well as on Twitter at David Haugh. That's Haugh for all sorts of things in Chicago. And you mentioned the different expectations and where they are in getting it. I think it's different when you're in the American League East and you see the Yankees and the Red Sox start to run away, younger, better positioned, lots of talent, lots of pipeline, certainly in the case of the Yankees. And more than that, lots of money on top of that. Getting out from under that when you're here and you've witnessed it the first time around, where it was the Yankees and the Red Sox for a good decade at the turn of the century, boy, they have resources that along baseball, this whole notion that we're going to become the Astros and we're going to draft and get younger, it takes incredible talent to do that. Not everybody picks players, and the resident geniuses you have there on the north side would be a great example of that. But who is picking the players is so paramount. We see that a lot in football on draft weekend of who are the talent evaluators and who are the Ozzie Newsomes that are good at picking Hall of Famers versus those that are going to pick stiffs. To your point, Theo Epstein and a whole bunch of analytics people in the front office, I'm probably going to bet on them every time as to never get outmaneuvered when it comes to dealing. It's kind of like dealing with Billy Beane. You always felt like he's going to fleece me. It's just a matter of how, right?
You're right, and there's that confidence, that incredibility that the World Series rings. Sort of, when he came to town, he had 2. Now he's got 3, and he's headed to Cooperstown. Everything that he touches seems to turn to gold, and everybody that he hires comes with that stamp of approval, kind of already. And so, from a columnist standpoint, being skeptical about the Cubs is not always recommended. I mean, you are naturally skeptical and cynical, but you also have to be fair. And you look at, Theo Epstein has made a lot of good decisions that have resulted in World Series titles, both in Boston and in Chicago. he knows when to pull the trigger, and he knows that that earns him the benefit of the doubt that not every executive gets. I don't know that Dan Duquette has that anymore in Baltimore. I think at one time maybe he did, but I think that, as you point out, when you are trying to establish a clear direction for your franchise, it helps to have, number one, if you don't have somebody who's done it successfully before, you kind of are, if you're going to start over, start new with somebody with a fresh set of eyes that's going to look at this in a way that's never been looked at before. Every organization needs that. You're right in terms of a lot of teams are trying to go the Astros route, the Cubs route, the Royals route. Those have worked successfully. Those have been great rebuilds that have resulted in championships. Are they exception or are they the rule? I think there are a lot of teams trying to believe that they are the rule. Teams like the Orioles, the Padres, teams like that. But you've got to seize on the assets that you have and the opportunities you get. I don't know that they have shown in how they've handled Machado that they understand that you sell high, and every day, as we pointed out, that he gets closer to the end of the season and walking as a free agent. They've cost themselves talent in a prospect, and you've got to stockpile those guys.
Dave, I wouldn't argue with you on that point, other than to say as we get closer to the deadline, if they have other suitors, maybe that would drive up the price of an 8-week rental versus, at this point, whatever, 13, 14-week rental, whatever that would be. And I would agree with you, but if they had 4 teams at the deadline trying to get Manny Machado, that would be something. Certainly the Dodgers, in losing Seager, they felt like, well, there's a bidder there, and they might stink too much to be a bidder, right? Other teams may just quack out and say, we don't want a rental of any kind for 8 weeks. And, Machado hasn't been the greatest guy in the clubhouse and the best teammate and the coolest-headed guy and all of that stuff to mix into the chemistry of what is already a winning team. I don't know that I'm going to displace shortstops or third basemen to make room for him if I'm the Indians or if I'm another team that's involved in that. Part of this may be trying to keep him away from somebody else. But right now, the bidding feels like the Cubs, because the Yankees and the Red Sox, they won't deal with those teams because they're too paranoid to do that, especially after watching Rodriguez beat them on Sunday up at Fenway. The Cubs feel like front of class, and it feels like if you have Theo Epstein and he's the only bidder, boy, we're going to get fleeced again and be talking about this like we talk about the Eddie Murray deal, 30 years later where we got Juan Bell, and I know you're saying whom. And when we're talking about Manny Alexander replacing Cal Ripken, and you say who? And with the Glenn Davis trade, the 30 years later, we still talk about as colossal failures. The fan base here knows enough to know how screwed up the Angelos family is, but there's also this, well, if you're going to deal Machado, at least get 2 ball players that are in the starting lineup in 2020, and they will be measured against that. And I don't have a lot of confidence that Manny Machado is going to bring that on July 31st.
That's an interesting point, yeah. And by the way, the Cubs fans would like to send their thank you to belatedly for Jake Arrieta, too, because he's, when you do business with the Cubs, that last time out, that was a deal that are the Orioles going to give the Cubs another player that helps them win a World Series? Because it already happened once.
Hey, we gave you Pedro Strop, too. Don't forget him.
Oh, that's right, Stropey. Yeah, he's did he tilt his hat when he was in Baltimore? I'm not sure.
It was a little Charlie Brownish, yeah. It was a little strange, yeah. I would agree with that. But the Arrieta thing, that is indicative of what this organization couldn't do to maximize a player's talents. And, the road is littered with that as we see the Kyle Davies and the Eduardo Rodriguez and players go other places and perform. That speaks to the ineptitude of the franchise. And I don't know that as we see the White Sox and the Orioles battle, you don't feel like the White Sox are inept, right? Like, guys like you checked off on the Chris Sale deal, whether Moncada turns out to be a Hall of Famer, and it certainly doesn't look to be that way, or anybody in the trade winds up being a legitimate star, all-star kind of player, that was checked off on even before he sliced the uniforms up down at Comiskey, right?
That's right. That's definitely right. When you evaluate sports, pro sports these days, and anytime, everybody wants to have this, everybody wants it now. And I think that what happens is that you see trend toward teams bottoming out. We're going through it with the Bulls in the NBA here. The White Sox decided to take that route. All you really respect, or what you respect most, is winning. But what you respect beyond that is what comes next is picking a lane, picking a direction that's clear for a franchise and for its fans to understand. It's not, it's not cheap to be a fan these days. It costs a lot of money to go to the ballpark. Fans want to know what they're going to see. Now, with the White Sox, they don't really ever draw that well anyway. You have to win to get people there. But the fans that are loyal understand what they're doing because they've established it. There's been transparency, there's been consistency, and there's been a plan. And I think that's what you look at. Are they executing the plan according to the way that they predicted and said that they would?
He is David Haugh. He covers all things Chicago sports at the Chicago Tribune as a lead columnist there. And, boy, your duties are never, there's never a lack of energy there, right, for all the teams. And
no off-season.
I mean, the Bears and where the Bulls are and the Blackhawks look like they've fallen and they can't get up here as we're trying to figure out, what's happening with the Caps as well. But the Cubs are everything there, though, now that they've climbed the mountain, right? Like, the expectation eternally is on them to win a championship here in October. The tables have turned. They're your best shot, right?
They're definitely at the top of the order. They're leading off. They definitely have the greatest chance to win a championship. The Blackhawks for a decade probably were the model of consistency. They missed the playoffs for the first time in 10 years, and it was hockey Armageddon here. And I think that you look at the Cubs. If the Bears were ever good again, in Chicago, that would be that would carry the day because everybody follows the Bears. The Cubs certainly have probably the biggest popularity at the moment, but it's still north side. There's still a pocket of baseball fans in Chicago that every time you write about the Cubs, I wrote a column about Yu Darvish this morning, and people were saying, "Well, you're just a Cubs fan." The Sox fans do exist, but everybody's a Bears fan, or everybody follows the Bears. So if they were ever good again, whenever that happens, maybe the next decade, then that will be exciting. But right now, it's a Cubs town.
I know you've been out there a long time and been at this since the turn of the century. And when I was at Sporting News Radio working out of Northbrook back in 99, 2000, 2001, I used to travel down to the Blackhawks games to see my friend Barry Trotz, who was then the coach of the Nashville Predators. And, there were 5,200 people in there. And, the Bulls were still sort of humming on the backside of Scottie Pippen, and Jordan was kind of gone at that point. And there was a statue out in front. But the Blackhawks were a running disgrace for really a generation. The game's not on TV. They had an oddball kook who owned the team that wouldn't do things for the fans, and no lights, no camera, no action, and all that stuff. And the moving from the stadium over to the United Center and the pricing. And my buddy Gene Ubriaco took a lot of advantage of that up on the north side with the Wolves as well. But the Blackhawks had the patriarch die, and the kid took over. I'm not saying that's going to be the case here with the Angelos twins and what they're going to do when this happens, but that changed everything in Chicago with the way the team was run, and it really led to, quite frankly, until the Cubs came along and we gave you Jake Arrieta a couple summers ago, the Blackhawks ran that place for a good period of time, and I was out there at a Rush concert in the middle of the Stanley Cup Finals a couple years ago, and it was absolute madness for the Blackhawks for a good 6-7 years when they were winning.
No, there's no doubt. Rocky Wirtz rejuvenated a hockey renaissance in Chicago, and everything about the franchise changed. It coincided. I mean, everybody in Chicago understands this. I mean, when Bill Wirtz passed away in 2007, I mean, it was almost within months the face of the franchise changed in every way, and they were on television. They had a new business plan. They had new direction. They had new owner. They had new leadership. And John McDonough came in from the Cubs after his meeting with Rocky Wirtz, and they have been the model of excellence in the NHL. Them and the Penguins in that decade. And so when they missed the playoffs this year, it was a shock to everyone's system. And there's a sense of urgency there too. And it was a hockey town again, and there is excitement. You'll see that at the convention. They get a lot of attention. They create a big buzz, and it's fun. It's fun if you are a hockey guy, and it's even fun to the casual fan because they have a group, a core that's likable, that's relatable, and that are visible. And hockey had to take a step aside a little bit because the Cubs won in 2016, which was epic. But it's a great time to be a sports columnist in Chicago.
Well, I would say this on the hockey side. I've been around the Caps a lot lately, and this is the stuff I say to my wife that I can now say on the air to a guy like you that's around the team. There's such an integrity about hockey, isn't there? Like for a guy that goes locker room to locker room, athlete to athlete, there's something about being around hockey players. And I covered hockey in the late 80s for the Baltimore Sun, and it's been a while since I've been around it on a day-to-day basis, and I chase them around in the playoffs when things are amped up and there's a lot more at stake and a lot more, drama and all that, and night to night, and to see the answers and the honesty and the integrity and the uncoachedness of hockey players after a game, it does take me back to my youth, and it's something that, quite frankly, you don't get from football and baseball players these days.
It's a generalization, but they tend to be have a little more sincerity and consideration when they're dealing with the public or dealing with the media. They tend to understand better than other professional athletes that the media role is a big part of their job, and it's a conduit to the fan base. And so that's a message that's reinforced on a daily basis in Chicago, and I think you see that in the way the Blackhawks connect. And it's all about connecting, and they do it as well as anybody.
Hey, man, a pleasure to have you aboard. Enjoy asking Manny Machado questions, and we'll see what else we can do to help Theo and Joe Madden try to win another championship there before the summer's over, okay?
Yeah, they'll send Baltimore a box of rings if it happens. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate that. I'm sure there'll be cigar rings. David Haugh joins us here from the Chicago Tribune. You can find him out at chicagotribune.com as well as at David Haugh, that's Haugh, covering all sports for the Tribune as a sports columnist out in the Windy City. I almost called it home at the turn of the century, a little bit, a couple days a week. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And if you want to get on a Belmont bus on June 9, please throw me an email trying to put together an interest list so we can push a bus up there and have some fun on June 9th, seeing Justify and Bob Baffert run for the Triple Crown. I've never seen a Triple Crown winner. I want to get that on my bucket list. I missed American Pharaoh. We'll see if we can do a redo. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.